I'm a third year student in environmental studies, minoring in Indigenous studies. And so today I'm just going to be speaking about kind of, I guess, my journey in getting a bit more involved in climate justice organizing. So I also want to start by saying, I know a lot of you in this class. I know there are organizers, activists, even land defenders in this class. So this is just kind of my perspective and things that I've learned. And I'd really enjoy getting to meet everyone and learn from all of you. So I want to start this presentation by recognizing that I myself, being in so-called Ottawa, am on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin and Anishinaabe land. And so as Professor Sanders said, this means that Algonquin peoples never agreed to share their land with the settlers or ceded it, surrendered it through treaty and treaties, though much about treaties is contested around the country. Algonquin territory was supposed to be protected by the Royal Proclamation of 1763, but land was lost from the aftermath of the American Revolution and onwards, despite, again, the Algonquins never ceding their land. So I think it's extremely important with land acknowledgements that they go beyond just being acknowledgements. And so I urge you to work to educate yourselves a bit on so-called Canada's past and current entanglement in colonialism. And there's so many ways to get educated nowadays, and I think this is vital to do given we're on what's essentially stolen land, and especially within the environmental movement, which leads into my next point. I want to mention that while this presentation is a bit on moving from theory to action in climate justice, I want to draw our attention to the fact that Indigenous peoples were the first stewards of the land, or environmentalists, and that you may have heard that Indigenous peoples make up only 5% of the global population, but protect 80% of global biodiversity. And so Indigenous peoples to this day are still on the front lines of conservation, not only just in the way they face colonial violence tied to the destruction of the environments in which they live in, but also they're often at the front lines of resisting massive projects that create enormous environmental damage, and they're often criminalized for this fact. And so at the end of my presentation, I have a mini resource document that I made to share with you, and it has within it some links to some Indigenous resistance movements and land back movements that's in no ways exhaustive, but could be a kind of like first step. So from there, I'm sure you've all heard of climate justice, but I just wanted to briefly kind of go over some important aspects of it. So it centers justice by recognizing that all forms of oppression are linked, and that those who are the most impacted by the climate crisis are often the least responsible for its causes. So climate justice centers the safety, the needs, and the rights of the most vulnerable persons and communities who are at the center of social and environmental justice struggles. It works towards transformation of systems and institutions that create oppression and inequality of the climate crisis and our current world. And it takes leadership from Indigenous and frontline communities that have been resisting and leading the fight against climate change. And then finally, it recognizes that intersectionality is central in the fight against climate change, and that many forms of justice must be present within our movement. And so with that, when I think about climate justice, I think it's important that we're kind of reflecting on who we're fighting for. And so we need to be making safe spaces for oppressed communities in the climate movement, because we all deserve clean air, water, and land. And we need to make the movement inclusive and safe for oppressed communities, because no one is disposable. So with that, I kind of have some pictures here, and I can talk about kind of what got me into climate justice. So in my first year of environmental studies, I got to my second semester and got to take my first ENV course, which, as the name suggests, opened my eyes to global environmental issues and introduced me to a lot more nuance in environmental problems than I had understood before. So I remember leaving the lecture hall distraught a number of times, just from learning about kind of the stark realities of the climate crisis, but then also kind of starting to learn about how human rights are tied to this as well. So just as, one example, one lecture we had was on fishing and overfishing. And so we were learning about just how big an issue this is. But not only that, how much of the world's population depends on fish for protein, and then how much of the world's population depends on fishing as a livelihood. And then on top of that, the extreme issues of human trafficking on fishing boats worldwide. So needless to say, I was fairly upset at the end of this course, and I didn't really know what to do about this. But our professor did give us kind of some I guess, tips in our last class on how we could take individual action to help mitigate the climate crisis. So examples were, reducing one's consumption of animal products, as that can reduce a person's personal environmental footprint. And then, we could purchase offsets for flights and try to offset our own impact, or write a letter to our member of parliament if we were really cared. And so at this point, I had gone vegan for environmental reasons. I was really trying to live frugally and was very, very conscious of my own personal impact. And so hearing this wasn't very empowering to me. I thought, well, there's nothing else I can do. And so I feel like I need to say that I totally understand why my professor at the end of a first year course didn't want to say, now it's time to roll up your sleeves and work to dismantle oppressive systems and fight large corporations through activism. But that's why I'm talking to you about climate justice as a second year class. So then that summer, after my first year, I was doing a bit of kind of mindless RA work and started listening to a lot of podcasts on how the fossil fuel industry has been engaging in misinformation campaigns for decades and working to stop climate policy, and then listening to different climate activists and speakers. So I really wanted to get involved. And so then I'd say that I spent most of my second year just trying to attend as many climate strikes, protests, Indigenous solidarity events, and climate justice events as I could, because I really wanted to learn from seasoned organizers, from speakers, from land defenders, the people that have already been doing this work. And I can say that there's like a pretty great community in the city that one can tap into to learn from people. And then in January, I got the opportunity to work as the coordinator for the UOSU's first sustainability center. That's really was the newest iteration of Ottawa's Sustainability Center. There used to be one with the SFUO. So this is kind of a student-led initiative. So I started in January with like no room, with just a bunch of boxes of things from probably like 2017, and just a lot of ideas. And so I have to say that from this experience, I learned many lessons. My goals with the center were first to hold the UOSU to a high standard of sustainability. So I worked to create resources for the Students' Union on like the usual sustainability things like recycling, like leading events that would be more sustainable, this kind of thing. But I also wanted to make this center kind of a climate justice hub. So I basically was trying to plan out a mini NGO, and for much of this time was kind of working as the only person with the center. So I tried to start different initiatives, like a letter writing campaign where people could join a call to write letters to members of parliament about different climate justice issues. And so I have to say, one thing I learned was just the importance of collaboration. It can be very easy to get focused on what you're working on and forget to reach out to others, even in creating your ideas. And then also simplicity, which leads into my last point. So, there's so many worthy causes within environmentalism, for sustainability. And I used to kind of think that if I thought of a certain angle or had an idea or learned something new about the climate crisis, I needed to do something about that. But I think it's what's great is that there are so many people working on all different environmental issues, and so you can take what you're passionate about, where you think you can make change, to allow that to guide you. And then around last year as well, I joined Climate Justice Ottawa, which is a group based in the city, and to learn from seasoned organizers again, as I said. And it was kind of unfortunate I joined right before the pandemic hit. So a lot of the organizing I've done has just been online, but this has been an interesting opportunity as well. So this has involved a lot of meetings and online webinars that I've attended, organizing calls with other groups. And then, of course, in the summer, I helped to start Climate Justice U Ottawa, because I didn't see that I saw there was no current climate justice group on campus, and some folks and myself wanted to launch a divestment campaign targeted at the university. I won't get into that since I already spoke to you about divestment, but just to give you a sense of kind of what happens in a given week. Lots of meetings, different web organizing calls. There's also reading groups that I attend. So as part of the Divest Canada Coalition, which is a coalition of different groups that have launched divestment campaigns, we have a reading group on what we call false solutions, that are kind of responses and routes that universities will take instead of divesting. So we read articles on this and discuss. And I've also joined a degrowth reading group from people that I've met through the Divest Canada Coalition. There's also campaigns, so it's interesting getting to meet different people and learn about all of the various kind of climate justice campaigns happening in different cities. There's social media, which has become, I think, a fairly big thing over the last year, which I'm sure everyone here has witnessed. There's a lot of activism that takes place on social media and a lot of, I guess, awareness raising. So I help run the social media accounts for both climate groups that I'm part of. And then finally, so many Slack workspaces. I'm in communication with a lot of people, get a lot of those notifications. So that's just to give a kind of mini sense of what it's looking like right now. Of course, things are fairly different with the pandemic. It'll be interesting to see what happens once it's a little bit safer to be out organizing in person. So then in making this presentation, I wanted to outline just a couple of steps or things that I've found were kind of key in myself becoming more active to share. And so I wish I could see people to ask how many people here are studying something related to the environment. But I can assume that if you're taking this class, you know, you're fairly informed, you care about the environment and about people, which is just really great. And I would say that this is kind of the first step, is caring about environmental issues, how they intersect with human issues, and then wanting to learn about them and starting to. So you might be thinking, yeah, okay, that doesn't tell me a lot, but I do think that especially as young people, we're made to feel as though we can't act in a meaningful way until we have a degree, especially on these large issues. And I think it's important to challenge this view because there's a lot that we can bring through our lived experiences, through our schooling and our own reading. And all of this knowledge is a form of empowerment. And then the other part of this has been recognizing my privilege. So, well, what got me into climate justice organizing was not me feeling the effects of the climate crisis every day, but this is not the same for everyone. And so I feel I have some responsibility to learn about these issues and to figure out what I can do in my capacity to work with others to act on that knowledge. And I also see it as a privilege that I'm able to learn about these issues to then just try and do something. From there, I'd say it's important to just recognize the power to make change. So I wish I could do another poll here, but I just want you to all reflect on how many times you've been told to turn the tap off while you brush your teeth or turn the lights off when you leave a room to help the environment and help mitigate the climate crisis. So while I think these actions, but this is all true, I think what climate justice offers is a way of applying understanding of environmental issues to broader and more empowering actions that take the onus off individuals. So by all means, work to reduce your individual impact, as I think it's super important and to be conscientious and it leads to further action. I think what climate justice asks of us is that if you're going to turn the tap off while you brush your teeth, to also consider reading a bit about the global water crisis or water privatization or how these are linked to human rights issues, because I think this also then gives you a larger framework to understand why it's important to take these individual actions, and it leads you to be able to just take more action. So in that way, there's power in the knowledge, and climate justice allows us to act on this. And then here, I think it's important to just kind of find your passion. So one thing about environmental issues is there's no shortage of them. And there's also no shortage of people that are working on various initiatives in various capacities. So here I just have like a bunch of names of a few different organizations that are acting directly on climate justice, but also on things like food justice and, enhancing democracy and pushing for activism in general, because I think there's a lot of different routes you can take. And so I think it's just great to find out what's out there, what you can amplify and support, who's already doing a lot of this work. And I have these names also in the document that I'll send. And then here, my last little point here is just on accepting the journey. So especially for folks wanting to get involved in climate justice work, there's a lot of mistakes made, a lot of lessons learned, a lot of, planning an action or something, and then having it not happen, turn out the way you would have hoped, and then kind of going back to the drawing board. And there isn't really like a blueprint for you on how to affect change. And so it's just, it's a whole kind of process, and I think a big part of it too is accountability, which can be difficult, and it can be hard, but it's great to learn to be open to accepting criticism and learning how to be called in and how to accept when you've made some kind of misstep. I know for me, like I try to think about how, feeling like my ego has been bruised, it can't stop me from taking further action. We always want to think that we're acting um, for the best reasons and in the best ways because we're passionate about issues, but it's just important to accept that you don't have all of the answers. And then I wish I had a separate slide on this, but since so much of my organizing has been online, I don't have a lot of pictures of myself with fellow organizers. But I think to end it on a happier note, one great thing about becoming more active is that you get to meet so many incredible people, and you meet people that are passionate about the same issues as you. You get to deepen your conversations about the things that you're passionate about, and it's great to work in solidarity with others. And so with that, I'll say thanks very much. Again, I'll send this just very mini resource document afterwards. And then just one little plug for myself is that tomorrow, Climate Justice U Ottawa happens to have a mini kind of event planned where we just want to reach out to more people, discuss with them. So we're inviting people to work on any kind of artistic project they would like, and to just discuss eco-anxiety with us on, how we can move to harness our feelings of like hopelessness or fear into a little bit more action. We're also having a new members meeting tomorrow. So, and just feel free to reach out to me for any reason, and if you are looking for any more resources. So yeah, I think that's my time and my little spiel. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Mary. That was really great. Thanks a lot. Very clear, very convincing. It's exactly what I hoped you would do. So thank you for that. Let me ask a warm-up question, and then I'll have time for questions. One thing. It's actually I'm sorry, it's a hard question. One thing which becomes really a bit of a riddle is how to overcome polarization. So you get that on COVID. Anti-masks, etc. It's linked to information, in misinformation too sometimes. But in on climate, the biggest problem I think has been polarization. So as an activist, how can you be effective? Maybe I should ask this way. Is there a risk that the better you become as a climate justice activist, that the more polarization you cause? Something like that. You see what I mean? Is there any trick, to be an activist and not lose some of the audience and so on?
All right, so I don't have an answer prepared for this. I think it's a really important question, one that I have been reflecting on, because I think there is a kind of a lot of divisiveness, and even within kind of activist communities, or even environmental activist communities. I think I wouldn't say that it should that the worry of polarization should stop somebody from acting. I would say that would not be the answer whatsoever. I think it's important to just like remain critical in your examination of issues. I think there's a lot of passion on all sides in environmental debates, in climate debates, and so I think that you should kind of stick to your morals. But when you're kind of examining situations and anything that you're reading, to just look at things with a critical view, to avoid yourself kind of, I guess, to keep looking at things critically. I hope that's like a little bit of an answer at least.
Hmm.
I don't think it should stop action altogether. I think there's also an important role for some folks in the environmental movement to play in trying to bridge some gaps between, let's say, like generational divides or different ways of thinking. I think like it's important not to be placing this burden on, let's say, marginalized communities or on people that are on the front lines, but I think it's maybe a burden that or work that maybe let's say more like privileged or white, let's say activist should bear to try and bridge, if it makes sense, bridge some divides, and I guess explain certain like new understandings within the environmental movement to try and work more collaboratively. So this doesn't need to be everyone's work, but I think it is kind of an important piece of the puzzle to be able to work together. I hope that answers at least a
That's
little
great.
bit.
Thanks very much, Maya. It's great. So I would say let's use the little hand feature of Zoom. It's probably the easiest. We have almost 60 people on the call. So if you would like to either ask Mary a question or make a short comment, questions are better than long rants, you know. So try to ask a short question if possible. But if you want to make a comment, it's okay too. Anyone? Who is going tomorrow? Who is going to climate justice tomorrow? Straightforward question.
I have a question.
Okay. John, please go ahead.
Well, I think Felix has a question first.
Okay, Felix, please go ahead.
Yeah, Mary, you said that it's important to still do the small actions, but you would encourage to do to get really involved. But I think for some people, and I speak for myself when I say that, I have many things in my life that I enjoy to do, and I feel that being an environmental activist is not really part of them, but I still want to do something to help that. Like, I'm just trying to be realistic, and maybe something I can do, like, on the side from time to time, and just to participate in some ways, because I don't want to I don't want to like focus especially just on this, but I'm trying to do my best and trying to do something. So maybe you have a suggestion of like a side action I could start.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think that's a really good one. And I wanted to be careful in talking about individual versus collective action, because I think it's true that individual action is important. And when it leads to kind of a greater awareness and consciousness, this is very important. So I think the point I more wanted to make is that I think it's great when individual action can lead to just getting a little bit more informed. So understanding, why you're taking those personal actions. And there's a lot of ways to get informed. I'd say too that, what my professor in first year said of writing to your member of parliament actually is something that's important. So I think if you're able to, carve some time out to sign petitions and to ever like write a letter to a member of parliament on a specific issue, when it comes time, there's a lot of NGOs that put out like letter writing campaigns and this sort of thing, is I guess a relatively simple way to amplify pressure in, I think, really important times. So I hope that helps a little bit. And so again, I want to reiterate, I don't want to say that individual action isn't important or that you shouldn't be doing these things. And I'm also don't want to say that everyone needs to go out, get into the streets and dedicate their lives to being a climate activist. I think it's staying informed and then kind of knowing when it's important to act.
I just want to add one quick comment. Influencing your near environment is also activism. You don't have to be on the street, and the traditional forms of political power, like parties. There's a Green Party. There are parties which have more climate commitments than others, and that's forms of citizenry that you actually expect as a citizen to take that route, and I think it's actually quite powerful at the end of the day. So just a quick add-on. Did Felix, did you want to say anything else before we move on?
No, I think
Sorry, I can't hear you right now.
Sounds like maybe he froze.
Yeah, okay. Maybe come in later, Felix. You can also use the chat is on today, so you can also use that. So let's go to John, please.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, just one quick statement and then my question. Quick statement, I just wanted to say happy birthday to Celeste Giovanni. I don't know if people knew this and everything, but I don't like letting moments like this pass by. I think birthdays are important. It's time to reflect. Celeste, in just in your life, you've seen the dawn of man, the building of the pyramids, the birth of Christ, the printing press. Anyways, to many more centuries of continued health. So happy birthday. Mary, I was wondering, what is one thing you think the University of Ottawa could do to help students be better activists?
Oh, that's a great question. Also, happy birthday, Celeste. That's so exciting. I hope you have fun plans. Yeah, I think this is kind of a tricky thing, and I think being on the sustainability committee, it's like sometimes not exactly sure where to use my influence and push, and I think sometimes maybe the university doesn't know where it should stand on helping students to be activists that might in turn demand more from the university. But I think like your office, for example, holds a lot of power and has a really big following, and just sharing more resources on climate justice and activism, even hosting like webinars, that sort of thing, to I guess broaden the conversation from sustainability into climate justice and activism as well, could be really great. I know that other schools like the University of British Columbia has a whole like climate action hub that I believe is kind of I believe there's partnership between the university and student groups themselves. So I think there's a lot of there could be a lot of opportunities there for, I guess, climate justice led by both the Office of Campus Sustainability and I think student-led movements too. So I hope that answers a little bit.
Yeah, thanks.
Other questions, comments for Mary? We still have time. I reserved until 1:45, so we have about 5 minutes left. Celeste.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments and some questions for you, Mary. So I have to say, all of the talks that you've given and the insights that you have when it comes to environmental action in Ottawa have been quite inspiring. And even as someone who's been in environmental studies and kind of been in sustainability for quite a few years now, I wonder, like, how did you, outside of the course that inspired you to get into environmentalism, like, how did you choose the specific route of activism and changing your lifestyles and ways of like the way that you eat and things like that? And like, how did you pinpoint exactly what part of environmentalism and sustainability you wanted to particularly like impact and be a part of? More personal question.
Yeah, so, okay. I don't know if I have a great answer to this. I think a lot of my mentality for a while was just like, do whatever I possibly can and like as fast as I can. So it was kind of like a quick switch to becoming vegan and a like quick jump to like, I need to go to every climate strike I can. So I think it was definitely led by, I don't know, just a want to do something or anything. I think from there I started to like, I've learned to really value what environmental activism can do, and I think the specific power it holds and that people hold that aren't kind of tied down in whatever power they have through like their work. And in, I guess, just I really like the idea of working with others to achieve certain goals, because I think within like eco-anxiety and within worrying about the climate crisis, it can be very, very isolating, and that's kind of not that really harms, I think, activism and change, because it does take a lot of people working together to challenge the systems that have led to the climate crisis. So I think it just offers an alternate route of action that I think it also is very targeted on the issues themselves, as opposed to just like, let's say, the individual actions, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's my kind of roundabout answer.